Hi, can everyone hear me okay? Over the ambient noise out the back, is it okay? I can't talk any louder. Can you turn it up, someone, a little bit? Oh, the guy's gone. That's okay? All right, kia ora koutou. My name is Penny Leach, and I'm from Leap, and I'm actually a New Zealander, which is why I'm speaking in English. I hope that's okay for everyone. I'm going to talk about Mahara, which is an open source ePortfolio system that New Zealand was very instrumental in developing. So first of all, what is an ePortfolio system? If you think about the traditional idea of the portfolio, it was a folder that artists put paintings or photos into to hand out and present to people. This is the idea on the left. The ePortfolio is that and a whole lot more. Rather than just pictures, it's also blogging or videos or rich media in a website that can be shared with people. I'm sorry for the horrible quality of the picture. That's I have no idea why that happened. It was a high-resolution picture, but... So this is actually a screenshot from Mahara. On the left, you can see there are some videos. There's a blog in the middle. There's some sort of flowchart thing, and some pictures on the right. So this is kind of a more modern version of the same traditional idea of what a portfolio is. The next part of an ePortfolio is, of course, social networking. It's all very well to create content and put it into a presentation where you can share it with people, but you need to find other people that you can share your content with. So you need to be able to create groups and forums and collaborate on content and share it. So you can make friends with people, you can give them access to your portfolio, that sort of thing. One thing that is really important in an educational context, especially with teenagers or younger children, a lot of schools, especially high schools, have said to me, we're really excited about what our kids are doing with these social networking sites like MySpace and Bebo and Facebook. They're creating content, they're sharing content, it's educational, but we're a little bit worried about the implications of letting them out onto the internet. So something like Mahara, an ePortfolio that you can have within the school, is a really good way of providing that functionality, but keeping it safe within the school environment, within the educational context. So the idea of a portfolio is that your learning is a lifelong thing. You start off very young, you're creating content, you're doing finger painting, then you move on to high school, you're creating different types of content, and on through adult education, professional development, and everything. So the idea is that people of all ages use a portfolio, they transfer their content around their whole life, and they build up on their learning content over a long period of time. So I have some pictures of some actual real people using Mahara. On the left, some students in Germany that are using it for their high school portfolios. This is a workshop about how to use their portfolios in a professional context here. And this is last year's Open Expo, us using Mahara as well. So, going back a little bit in time to 2006, in New Zealand we had a Ministry of Education fund for encouraging collaboration in e-learning. In 2006, why? This is a map of New Zealand. You can imagine that this is the South Island and this is the North Island. It's actually, there's a map on my screen. I don't know why there's not a map there. Anyway, by 2006, we already had 2 years of funding by the ministry to do this collaboration and e-learning. And most of the focus had been on learning management systems. So you can see here there's little Blackboard icons and little Moodles all over the country. So there's a lot of e-learning going on already by 2006. There's not that much money in individual universities and institutions. New Zealand is not a crazy rich country. It's not a third world country, but there's still limitations on the sort of innovation that you can do. So the government creates this fund and they say, we have some money, we're going to enable you to do this sort of collaboration, and you can choose to be a part of it if you want to. So they make it sort of that you would be stupid not to partake. So the idea behind this fund is that you make it available. This is my little Web 0.9 troll, because we're at a sort of Web 2.0. Mahara is very Web 2.0, and I think it's, yeah, heinous. So we were setting up a project to create an ePortfolio for all universities or polytechs in New Zealand that wanted to be a part of it. And if they decided that it benefited the institution, they had a very low cost of entry to get involved. So originally we had a consortium, a group of universities and polytechnics. Back in 2006, the idea of an ePortfolio was very vague. It was still somewhat undefined. People didn't quite know what it was. And so we thought, well, we have some ideas, but there's no way that we're going to be able to cover all possible scenarios for how an ePortfolio can be used. So let's start with having a broad range of input about what it should do. So we had universities, very traditional. We had Institution of Technology. We had Wānanga, which is the native Maori universities in New Zealand. We had a very broad range. And out of that consortium, there was a steering committee of 13 people. And they really drove the direction of what the system should do. And of course, because the funding was all about collaboration, the best way to do that was open source. There was no question that we were going to have an open source project to enable this sort of collaboration between universities. We also had a very transparent development process right from the start. I was the original lead developer. That's my role in this. I'm a programmer. And the universities that decided to implement this project were required, as part of the agreement to have funding, to publish the case studies and implementation guidelines, so that at the end of the year, we only had a year for the original phase of this project. At the end of the year, there was kind of a theoretical framework for how universities could use ePortfolios. Again, I have a nice map of New Zealand here behind this. So what we ended up with was this thing called Mahara, and we have one Mahara installation that the ministry subsidises for students, and the idea is that every student in New Zealand could have an ePortfolio if they wanted to. And the other really important outcome that we were working towards was that because we only had a year of funding, we had to create something that would continue to be sustainable past the direct funding from the ministry. So this comes into the open part. We actually started off with the GPL2, but now we're GPL3, so we've been open source right from the start. We did the very release early, release often, traditional open source development methodologies. We have support for open standards, and the Mahara programmers are involved in a standard called Leach 2A, which is about portfolio interoperability. And this is really important because with the idea of lifelong learning, you're not just going to have one school that has one Mahara that you can put your content into your whole life. You need to be able to move your content around with you. So interoperability is paramount, and open standards fit in with what we were doing perfectly. The other thing is the case studies from the original implementations were all published under a Creative Commons license, so that any other universities or polytechs or even high schools that wanted to get involved could build upon the work that had been previously done. So when we started, we had basically 3 months to develop an ePortfolio system. And I went, holy crap, that's not very much time, what are we going to do? And so I looked around, and a project that I was really familiar with was Moodle, which is an open source learning management system that maybe some of you know about already. And I thought, okay, there are some things that Moodle does really well, let's steal those ideas. So we took some code, we took some of the plug-in modular architecture, and this is another important point about us not feeling so arrogant that we could decide what an ePortfolio system was for everyone. So we made it very pluggable architecture so that universities or even corporate environments that had a different idea about what an ePortfolio was could just write a little module or a little plugin and continue to build upon the sort of framework that we created. And I thought to myself, we need to generate a community to sustain this project. And in some respects, Mahara is a very orthogonal project to Moodle. Moodle is the sort of traditional learning environment with courses where teachers put learning material into the course and the students consume it. And on the other side is Mahara, where the students are responsible for publicizing their own environment, their own content. So the two are related, but they don't compete with each other. So I thought, there's this huge Moodle community. I wonder if we can steal some of the Moodle people to come and work on Mahara as well. And so the first obvious thing that we did was make the technology stack very similar, so that people that already had Moodle, which is a PHP, Apache, MySQL-ish, I'm a Postgres fan, so I have to say MySQL-ish, platform. So we made Mahara the same, so that you could just put it on the same server and it would just run. I say LAMP-ish because the M is for MySQL, and I'm, yay, Postgres. I talked to some Postgres guys recently, and they said they consider LAMP to mean, I'm totally trolling MySQL, so I'm sorry if there are MySQL fans here. The M in LAMP is for middleware, so it's Linux, Apache, middleware, Postgres. So we're now quite a few years on from where we originally started. We have a thriving community. We have forums on mahara.org, which is our community site. We have communities of practice. We have teachers talking about the pedagogy of using Mahara in the classroom. We have 11 different translations. We have a partnership program, which means that the open source project continues to be open source, but there are companies around that are allowed to call themselves Mahara partners, and they provide professional support, of which now I work for one. And we have a slow but increasingly active developer community. We have people sending patches, we have people writing plugins, so we're getting there. We're starting to be really sustainable. Looking into the future, one thing that I've found working in open source, which has been quite a few years now, is that we always need funding. We always need projects that someone says, yeah, Mahara fits pretty well for us. It's maybe 90% of the way there. We need an extra 10% of work done, and we're going to fund some development and then work with the development community. And that's how Mahara evolves. The hardest thing, there are so many of these Web 2.0 sites that are kind of providing the same sorts of things as Mahara. There's Facebook, which is the huge one. And they're basically our competition. And one of the Facebook is always the way that people, the baseline that people use to understand what Mahara is. People say, yeah, but what does it really do? What is an ePortfolio? Is it like Facebook? It's always the thing that people say. And the answer is, yeah, it kind of is a bit like Facebook. You have your network, you're creating content, you're putting content into the system, you're sharing it with people. But the key difference is, well, not only is Mahara open source, but there's also a way to get your data out. And you don't transfer like your life's work to Facebook or whatever. But really, we have to kind of push to highlight these differences, because otherwise people will just use Facebook. Maybe there are some people in the audience that are interested in Mahara. Maybe you will contribute to the future of Mahara. Go on, you know you want to. And of course, you know, we always want world domination. So yeah, see, this is what the picture before was supposed to look like. There was a little map of New Zealand, and then there was a little ePortfolio icon. So I don't know why this one showed up and the other one didn't, but this is what we're aiming for. We want to have world domination. I'm actually quite ahead of time, but I'm ending with this beautiful quote from one of my absolute heroes. I went to the Linux conference in New Zealand this year, and there was a talk about this guy, Mark Osborne. And the title of the talk was The Bravest Man in New Zealand. And this guy is the deputy principal of a high school. And they are a brand new high school. So they were able to make a decision to start however they wanted, really. They could just completely do whatever they wanted from the beginning. They didn't have a legacy of systems that they had to support or contracts with vendors or anything. They had a fresh slate. And in New Zealand, the Ministry of Education have a deal with Microsoft. Even though I've said before that there's a lot of work going into open source, there is some Microsoft use in New Zealand as well. And the deal that the ministry have means that individual schools don't have to negotiate with Microsoft. They're just free to use whatever the ministry has negotiated on their behalf. And it's free. But what this high school did was they decided, yeah, even though we can have Microsoft for free, I think we'd rather have a different sort of freedom. And they set up this school, and they have Ubuntu machines in the classrooms, and they have Their staff laptops are Ubuntu, and they have Moodle, and they have a library management system called Koha, which is also originally written in New Zealand, and they have Mahara. And I think that this quote is a beautiful summary of what's kind of happening in New Zealand, that you can have some of these things for free, but at the end of the day, it's kind of more important to choose a different type of freedom. So, who has questions?